Kimi is the latest AI large language model on the scene. Today, I'm going to be checking out the free version. We're going to try some of the different functions, test some prompts, and seeing whether it is worth you checking out as an alternative to the other large language models that are out there. It's open source. You can download it from GitHub as well as using it on the Kimi.com site. If we have a bit of a scroll down, they give a whole lot of benchmarking. And overall, these benchmarks, when we line it up against some of the competitors like ChatGPT, Gemini, and DeepSeek, seems to be performing pretty well. If you have some decent computing resources at home, this could be an alternative to something like DeepSeek or Llama for you to download and play with. For most people though, you're going to want to just come to Kimi.com. Like ChatGPT and the others, there is a free option. It is somewhat limited, or we can upgrade, and we can see that they have $19, $39, and $199 a month plans. This has been built in China. You may want to keep that in mind when thinking about what data and inputs you do share with it. But again, because it is open source, just like with DeepSeek, you can put it onto other servers. You can operate it somewhere else on your own. One feature that I'm looking forward to checking out a little bit later is the slides. I have seen some pretty good feedback on it being able to make slides better than a lot of the other AI models. Before we get to that though, we have an explore of this homepage and we'll test out some prompts. If you've used any large language model, this is going to be looking pretty familiar. We've got our chat box in the middle. Down the side, we've got our chat history. We've got our tools where we can pop out. We can turn the search, internet search on and off, thinking for those more deeper reasoning problems. OK Computer is their version of agents. So if you want something that is more agent oriented, you're going to be clicking on that. You can see that there are some limitations on the free version. And then similarly, researcher, like the deep research function in ChatGPT. We've got a drop down to go between the K2 and the K1.5 models. We can attach up to 50 files. And we can save. There's some examples down the bottom here. We might have a go. There's some examples of some of the functions down the bottom here as well. So let's start off just with a few different prompts, just to get it doing some stuff, get a feel for what it's like. First thing we have put in, I just used another LLM to give me a sample of some different prompts, doing something where there is something scientific and there is some competing theories. We can see that as it's searching, it's telling us what it's doing. It's giving us the sources for the web search. We can see it writes in that old ChatGPT style, line at a time. And I just had a look in the settings, couldn't find a way to turn that off, whether we can prompt it away. With the Impemba effect, it is something where there is some competing theories. It's sourced those out. It's given us some hyperlinks. It's given us evaluation and conclusion. For something where I didn't really give it super detailed prompt, but it was something that required a little bit of searching and thinking, did a pretty good job. Next up, let's get it to write an email. Again, we used a fairly simple prompt. One thing you may or may not have noticed from the previous one and this one so far, no em dashes. Having said that, the degrees North Star is a bit of wonky phrasing there. Let's move on to a bit of creative writing. So we want a poem about rain without some of the words we might expect, and we're asking for 6 syllables per line. Had to pause for a second just to count off the syllables on each of those. But as far as it goes, I think for something with a bit of creativity, where we've also set restrictions, it followed the instruction of the restrictions, and I'm not an amazing poet, but that seems quite reasonable for what we asked it to do. Now giving it a data set in a CSV format. Let's start off by asking it to plot height versus weight. This is data that I've used before. If you've watched some of my videos getting ChatGPT or Claude to do data analysis, it's from the Australian Institute of Sport. It's public data. And we can see that it's kicked off by opening up this Python box and starting to write Python code for us. There is our first limitation that we've hit. It gave us the Python code, but in fact, it can't run the code snippets. It does give the instruction for going off and running it yourself. And just looking at this, we imported the data. We are doing a scatter plot. We didn't ask it to color code by gender, but it has decided to do that anyway. So it didn't exactly follow what I asked. Just to test a little bit more, I asked it to find the correlation between height and weight. And again, it decided to split by sex without me asking it to. In this case, it does kind of make sense since we might see slightly different relationships for the male athletes and the female athletes, but it isn't doing what I asked it to. It did actually provide some output this time though. So it looks like if we are asking for figures that it can just print out as opposed to a visualization, then it will be able to produce it for us. So carrying on with that theme, just to see how it goes with coding, we saw it spit out a little bit of Python there. It seemed fine. Now I'm going to ask it to write an R function. Also asked it to explain the approach to a non-programmer. So we've asked it to find the nth Fibonacci number efficiently. So that's something where there's probably a little bit of consideration of how we go about doing it. It's given us the R code, it's given us some test cases, and then it's given us the plain English explanation. And that was pretty good. It's explained the leap rule, and I think it's done a pretty good job for someone who is neither a coder nor a mathematician, just explaining what it has been doing there. We're going to test this Kimi slides feature. What I would like is, I'd like a set of slides. I have this journal article that I published last month, and I have been meaning to make a YouTube video about it, but it'll be handy to have some slides. And so we're just going to whack this in there as some source material, and we'll see how it goes with producing slides. What I've found is that ChatGPT and Gemini, they're pretty good with giving some bullet points, but then when it comes to putting that into a PowerPoint, and in fact, even Copilot I've found pretty clunky for actually getting the design features. So we can see it's doing a bit of work. It's read the whole paper. It has divided it up into subsections, and then it's given us options of a preset mode and an adaptive mode. So adaptive mode, smart layout, creative design. Preset mode, I suspect, is a little bit simpler. We'll go with adaptive mode. And so that gives us a whole lot of slide templates. Doesn't seem to be any filter to these. So I think there is just a case of scrolling. That one looks okay. We'll hit generate slides. So once we chose a design, then it started generating, and generating seems like a fairly slow process. We can see that we're 4 slides in so far, and the slides look okay. Probably not quite what I expected. Perhaps my expectations were a bit high, given that I'd seen a few people online going on about how it does such a great job. This is fine, I guess, but not super amazing. Thought we would just try a couple of their suggested ones and also test out this researcher function. If we click on web app, gives a few examples here. Spin up a website for linen clothes. And we can see as soon as we hit one of these ones down the bottom, it does activate the OK computer. So it is using an agent mode, which we only have limited of on our free plan. Let's click on this. Gives us a fairly detailed prompt. Let's give it a run. So it took the prompt, and we can see that we now have the split screen. It's created a list of the things that it needs to do in order to get to the end. We can see deploying the website being the last step. Okay, so that took a wee while. I suspect it might, in the free version, be coding a little bit slower, maybe a little bit slower than Gemini or ChatGPT. I was really impressed by the thoroughness though. So it created that to-do list, and then it started out searching for market research, had a look at other content that was out there, went and hunted for information about what it should be showing, images, structure. It generated images for us, and we'll have a look at the preview. So we've got the preview over here. I've also popped it out into a new window, and here in the chat we can see that it has run through. It's even tested functionality, done some unit testing type stuff. We've got a folder with all of our files in it, and let's have a look. So it's created a brand, it's created the website, including cart. It's even given us placeholders on clothing here. So everything right through to products. And we've got this all templated now. We can add our own products, we can make the edits. I think it's done really nice with the aesthetic, the theme, based on what we were asking about. Probably want to change the story to something that's real, although I think that's probably interesting to see, because I think there is a lot of these e-commerce sites that are being spun up and they're trying to look like they are a local shop when in fact it is just someone that's done something like this. So it all looks pretty convincing. If we were going to carry on, we'd need to go out and find some of these products to start stocking the store. But in terms of an exercise and seeing it work through all of the steps for producing the website. It was definitely very thorough. More thorough, I would say, than the free versions of the equivalents that are out there, and at the very least on par with even some of the paid ones. So the last thing that I was going to show you was the research function. I clicked on the researcher icon for the deep research. I've asked for an in-depth referenced academic report about AI and medical education and how training providers will need to adapt. And then it asked me a number of different qualifying questions, just like the ChatGPT deep research would do. I answered those, and then it got going. And so it was searching. We can see that it is coming up with various different sub-questions. But as we scroll down, we can see that it just kept searching for more and more sub-questions. And we are, I think, more than half an hour. I've lost track of the time. And it is still going. It just keeps coming up with more and more. Now it's come up with something. It's overlooked some other crucial thing. And so I'm going to call it there. We're not going to get to see the report, but I think for most people, the amount of time that this has taken is more than what you would wait. With most of the deep research functions, they take a while. 10 minutes is not uncommon. But this has been going for much longer than that. In summary, I think Kimi is a really interesting alternative to the other large language models that are out there. Bearing in mind what I said before about it being a Chinese company, there may be some implications in terms of servers and where they are storing their information. Things that I really liked, I thought that it wrote and coded pretty well. The website that it came up with, I thought looked really good. If you are an enthusiast and you have some set up at home to be able to run your own large language models, the fact that they've got it over here on GitHub and you can play with it yourself, I think is also something that a few people will take interest in, but that is relatively niche. I was disappointed with the Kimi slides. They didn't really come out particularly nice at all. And I was disappointed with the researcher function where I don't think it's stuck on a loop, but it was just got a little bit stuck. We are on the free version, and so some of the slowness we've seen with some of the writing and processing is possibly a function of that, but I think that is another downside. If you've made it to the end, thanks for watching. I hope this has been interesting, even if Kimi has not turned out to be all that amazing and groundbreaking. Certainly had some good elements. Next up, you might like to see some of the other AI videos of different recent AI tools that I've done. I'll link that up with a playlist here.